it is hard, and it's okay that it's hard. That's also, I think, what I learned here. But it does get easier. You do get more used to saying goodbye. Like in the beginning, when I said goodbye to my mom, my dad, my sisters, I was crying every time.
That's really interesting that what you mentioned, that once you start open to opportunities, they all of a sudden start appearing in your way.
I knew I wanted to be more location independent and travel, but like you also need money at one point. I didn't want to feel like I have to come back to the Netherlands.
Build that this habit every time I do something to take a moment to be grateful for that, because that's not a given. And I might not be here next year. I might not be here next month. Let me tell you a fun fact about the podcast. We're at the beginning process and you can have a tremendous influence over our channel. By just liking and subscribing to our channel, you'll help us increase the quality of the videos that we're creating. Also, you'll stay in the loop with the new videos which are coming every week. Thank you and enjoy the episode. I'm really happy to have you here today. I'm really excited for the conversation we're going to have, and welcome everybody to Infinito Podcast. I have here my guest, Anouk. She's been traveling for almost 10 years now. And we're going to learn more about her story, and also we're going to delve more into the topic of attachments and also how to let go of things. So welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to start this conversation with you.
Thank you for being here. So let's just jump right in. Tell me a little bit about your trip to India. And first thing first, how did you end up living in the first place? How is that process happening for you?
Yeah, that was definitely something that I never imagined that I would be doing. I had a pretty normal, whatever normal is, upbringing in the Netherlands, but I was always quite curious about other cultures and countries. I like studying languages, but we always went to Europe on vacations with family, so I hadn't really been so much out. And at one point when I was finishing my bachelor, I did an Erasmus semester in Madrid, in Spain. I felt the world opening up to me. It was really out of my comfort zone, quite challenging. And by the time it was over, I felt like, hey, I'm just getting started here. So I thought, let's do something a bit more crazy, even further out of the comfort. I took a gap year and I said to myself, let's try to find work, an internship, or any experience outside Europe in an environment that's very different from anything that I know. But when I was looking, I never in a million years expected that I would end up in India, actually. An opportunity just came to me. Someone reached out saying that they had a cool job at a software company in India. And it just sounded really fun. And I jumped at that opportunity. So yeah, how did it come to be? Just like that, very random. I had a desire to try something that was completely different, started looking, and then that opportunity came to me and I was like, well, okay, let's go. And I think within 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks, I was on a plane to India.
That's really interesting that what you mentioned, that once you start open to opportunities, they all of a sudden start appearing in your way. And you put into your mind the idea that you want to try something outside of Europe. And you mentioned that in 5 weeks, you're already on the way to India.
Yeah,
That's
exactly
really
like that. Yeah, I think once you have clear of like what you want, it will come, but the how and where, that was like not decided for me at all, right? Like I remember I was even thinking like probably not a place like India, like that's too far of my comfort zone. It sounds so crazy, such a different culture. But honestly, it's been one of the best decisions I could have ever made in my life. I was only 20 years old to experience like a culture and a lifestyle that is so different from my own upbringing. Like I totally loved it. I would work during the week in the office in India and with my Indian colleagues. We would talk to European clients over Skype, super old school, like the OG Nomad tool, I would say. And then I would just like hop on a bus or a train on Friday night to travel around India during the weekend. I mean, like that were all things that I did not imagine when I said like I'm opening up to this opportunity, but it came to me and it turned out to be amazing. It worked out so well for me. So yeah, I think that's something I definitely took from that, like open up and say that you want to do something, but like maybe don't fill in all the blanks because it's cool, whatever will come to you.
Absolutely. I think that the first part of the first step of trying something new is just to be open up and look for the opportunities. And more often than not, they're going to appear in your way without knowing. It's something interesting, and it's a very trivial story that I'm going to share with you. But a long time ago, when I was in England, I was I don't know if you know this, but in England there is a habit for people to leave stuff outside the house once they are they're still useful, but they want to give it away to other people. So you just leave like useful stuff in front of the house for people to pick it up. And at some point, something went wrong with my keyboard, didn't work anymore, and I was looking for a keyboard, and I was walking on the street, and I saw a box full of keyboards, and I kind of started looking through them, and I asked the neighbors like, "Hey man, like since when you had this around?" And he's like, "I took them out like last week." And I was thinking to myself, I passed through the box of keyboard every single day for a week, and I never saw them. And all of a sudden, when I was looking for a keyboard, they just appear my way. And I was thinking that's truly interesting. Once you aim towards something, once you kind of focus your attention, like I want to get X, your focus and your vision is going to shift towards the thing that you're looking for, and you're going to see more opportunities in your way.
True. I think I've heard this once, that this concept, is it called like the red car? Like once you want to buy a red car or something, you start seeing red cars everywhere. Am I mixing it up now? I think that's the keyboard one, right? Yeah.
It is something similar like that. Like once it's you see what you're looking for. So
Exactly.
that's something truly interesting, is that you have to have a positive mindset, and you have to look for opportunities and have to look for positive things in your way. And that's going to manifest into your life, and they're going to appear in your way.
Exactly. And I think the opposite could also be true here, because when I was living that life in India, I felt super happy, really in the moment. I didn't want to leave. But eventually I did decide to move back to Europe, pursue a master in Amsterdam, and I had a good time. I got a nice circle of friends. I got into a graduate program, all of this. But I think my mind was still so focused on this experience that I had in India that I felt like I was never really blending back in the Netherlands again and like fully enjoy that. So I feel like it also has the other side, right? Like the flip of the coin. Like I was so focused on that kind of opportunity that it was hard for me to stay open to the experience that could have come to me in the Netherlands. But I found it really hard to readjust there, to be honest.
Absolutely. And this is also one of those things in life, when you experience something which is different, in a quite, it's very different from something you've experienced before, and then you like that experience or enjoy the experience a lot. You can't really go back to your day-to-day life and say like, okay, I'm just gonna live a normal life, because there is some idea that's building up inside your mind. It can be more than what I have, and then you can't just sit down and live your life, because it's like a virus installed into your mind. So like, I need to go somewhere, I need to try something else, I need to have an adventurous lifestyle, I need to do things.
Right. And then it's like the keyboard or the red car. All I could think about were other people that I saw around me, like also going traveling or going on backpacking adventures and meeting more people who are looking to do that. So I feel like you push yourself through this process and go into that tunnel, basically, because that's all I could think about at that point in my life, to break free and try something else.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this question. When you left the first time to move to India, was it difficult to disconnect from your lifestyle that you had before, from your people, and also from everything that you had there?
When I moved to India, I would say not that crazy, because of course I was nervous, but I had that experience in Madrid before. So I knew what it was like to be somewhere else in a new environment. And I also knew, I guess, in a way that it was very temporary, and it happened so quickly. So I had no time to gather any, like, what do you call it, expectations. And I think that's also why my experience was so amazing. I had no idea what to expect. It was a huge culture shock, super overwhelming, but I was really open to that. And in the end, I think at that point, I didn't expect yet, like, I'm going to be away forever, right? Like I still had like stuff at my parents' place. The idea was that I was going to come back to the Netherlands, finish a master's and start working there. So at that point, wasn't really a hard process because it didn't feel so definite yet. I think after that, when I started to decide like, hey, I do want to make this more of a permanent way of living where I don't live in the Netherlands and pursue something else, that was a bit harder, because I think then all the voices come to you like, what if, and how am I going to do that? Like, of course, people around you have opinions. And I felt at that point in time, like I said, I started to focus more on people that were traveling and living a different way of life. But this was like pre-pandemic. It wasn't that normal as it is these days. It's still not the norm, but more people these days are traveling or working somewhere else. And back then I struggled a bit to find examples of people who did that for the long term. So that was harder to let go of that idea, like, hey, how am I going to do that? And does it mean to leave everything behind? What will my life look like on a day-to-day basis? Definitely, that was difficult to imagine.
So how do you approach the process? It's like you're jumping into unknown. Nobody knows what you're doing, and then you just like, I want to have a different kind of lifestyle, and everybody lives by the status quo. It's like, just get a job, live in a family, buy an apartment, and then get married, have kids, and then continue the circle. And then you're like, I want to do something else, but you probably don't have anybody around you who's telling you like, oh, go, or like at least to show a degree of encouragement of example. Like, how do you approach that? How do you overcome that obstacle of connections that you try and like the network that you have that doesn't do that, and you're trying to do something completely new and different?
Yeah, I think that's the hard part, right? Because, like you mentioned, we have a certain way of doing things, at least maybe in the cultures where you and me come from, and that's kind of what you're expected to do. So I would break free in smaller ways, go on like little backpacking trips or holidays in between jobs or take time off. And I would try to see who else is doing life very differently than I am when I'm not in my familiar environment, because that's always a bit easier, I feel. I was starting to read some books, listen to other people, go online and do deep research. Like, that's what I like to do. I'm a research person. I like to find other people, talk to them, see what their experiences are like. So I just asked connections of connections if they knew anyone who was living and working abroad. Because what I did feel like, I liked backpacking and all that, but I felt like it wasn't really sustainable for long term. Like, I knew I wanted to be more location independent and travel, but like, you also need money at one point. I didn't want to feel like I have to come back to the Netherlands, take a new job, save up, and do it all over again, because that's kind of the same pattern. So yeah, I started to see what are people doing that I think is sustainable, that I could also achieve, and that sounds good to me. So what I did at one point is think about my experience in India. Like, I was working, I was making money, and I had time to do fun things. Other people are also like working and traveling. I heard vaguely about digital nomad concept at the time. I talked to some people, and then I just decided, let's pitch an experiment to my employer at the time in Amsterdam. So I asked them like, hey, how would you guys feel if I take a month in Asia where I would take 2 weeks of holidays and 2 weeks work? Because I could tell them, like, I did that before. I worked in India using Skype and all that for European market. Like, I know how to manage the time zone. I think I have a good understanding of what that would be like. And they found that pretty weird, because again, this was like 2019, pre-pandemic. But they were also thinking, like, if that's what makes you happy, we can't tell you not to try, right? Like, we're also happy with the work you do. So yeah, let's give it a go. And I did that. And I told them, if it all goes really badly, I can just take full holidays instead of 2 weeks work. But it went super smooth. And I asked like the accounts that I was working on at the time, like once I came back to the Netherlands, whether they felt like anything had been different. And they were like, no, not really. And I told them, well, I was actually in Vietnam, working at distance. They're like, oh, that's cool. Like, the reactions were pretty smooth. And that really convinced me, like, hey, other people do this. I try it for myself now in a small experiment. This worked well. I'm not bothering the people that I'm working with. So yeah, let's just try to make it a bit bigger, like go from an experiment to something more permanent. And I asked the company, like, could I do this more often? And they said, sure, maybe twice a year, which was pretty cool, obviously. But for me, that was, again, like, no, that's not going to cut it. Like, I think I want to do this full term. And I think I was confident enough at that point to say, okay, then I go my own way. And yeah, let's take a deep dive. Let's go into the adventure. And what helped me was that I took those deep dives before. Like, I jumped on a plane to India when I was 20 years old. I've been traveling. I did that experiment. So I felt like, okay, I can do this. But it takes also like believing in yourself and taking the jump and feeling like, hey, if it doesn't work out, I can always come back. But I would rather try it and regret that it didn't go so well than not ever trying at all. So I feel like that has been my process there.
Absolutely. I think that's a great analogy in the fact that you have to build up the belief in yourself. I think that's really interesting. And you mentioned that the trip that you took to India also helped you build that belief in yourself. Like, hey, I can do this, and this is what I want to do. And I had similar experience when I moved to Mauritius the first time. I had exact similar experience, but that happened during COVID. So I didn't tell anybody that I'm going from a company because I didn't want to risk getting a no. My policy at the time, at least now as well, is like, better ask for apology rather than approval.
Right.
So if anything,
did they ever figure it out?
Not really, because yeah, the pandemic lasted. I suspected that the pandemic is going to last a lot longer than people were expecting. And that happened in November 2020. So I decided to move. It was a very interesting story. Is like I decided to move, and then I couldn't take anymore in London because I'm a very social person, and everything was closing down again. I was like, this is going to be bad. And then I decided to move. And some things kind of worked out, and I managed to get some funds to be able to support my journey. And then, okay, I feel like the universe is kind of putting pieces in place for you to go that direction. You kind of feel like just small wins here and there that kind of push you in the right direction. Like, okay, maybe I see a pattern here. And one thing that I find truly interesting is that when I left on the 22nd of December, on November 2020, and the borders in UK closed down on 25th, which is 3 days after I left. So if I could waited 3 more days, I would have been locked in the country. So like,
Wow.
okay, this is something truly amazing and extraordinary. Maybe the universe trying to tell me something. And again, going back to the story, is like I returned back to England, and then the second time I left, it was a lot easier because I knew what I'm getting myself into. I knew what to look for, and you kind of there are a lot of things that you look for when you travel. And then first you look for accommodation, you look for a visa, you look for like stuff around you that you need to purchase, and to have a sustainable life. And when you did that a few times, you kind of have a sense of what to look for. You know exactly what areas you should target for accommodation, what people should you talk to, and then you kind of search ahead for potential ways, and it becomes easier. And also, as you mentioned before, it builds a tremendous amount of confidence in yourself. It's like, okay, I can do this. I have this. Even if it's a bigger challenge than before, it's like I had this.
And I think what is also funny, what I see a lot with first-time travelers, which I also totally did, like the first time you go on a trip, you bring so much stuff, right? Like I think on my first backpacking trip to Peru, I brought clothes literally for every single day because I didn't think that I would do laundry. Like I think about it, like how do people do laundry there, right? Of course, that's possible. And I see the same here, like so many people bring so many things that you really don't need. You can buy them at the location, but probably you won't need it. And I think that's the same thing. You will stop sweating the small stuff and you will build confidence that you can handle the bigger stuff. But of course, you need to go through it once. We're all super scared and nervous the first time. And I think that's beautiful. Like I also enjoy that kind of like feeling in your stomach, like, oh my God, I'm doing something totally crazy and I'm never going to do it again for the first time. And that's also something beautiful that we should value, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely. Something I learned from my first time experience is that to enjoy truly the moments when I'm nervous, when I'm about to do something that makes me nervous. Like you're gonna remember this moment and you're gonna think about it's like, oh, remember that time when I was traveling the first time, what I did X for the first time, how nervous was I? That's a very memorable moment. So I remember all the time to enjoy it.
Exactly. Yeah. What was the most nervous you've ever been? Was it that first trip then, or did you have other travel experiences that made you super nervous?
Like travel-wise or just in general?
Yeah, travel-wise. Let's stick to travel.
Travel-wise, I think that was probably the first step, because I honestly think that I'm not going to make it back. I thought it's going to be like, I'm just going to die somewhere on the way. And it's because it was a COVID happened and I was in a very low points emotionally and mentally, and I didn't think they're gonna make it. And my point at the time was like, if I must go, at least do something, just die something doing what you love.
Right.
Like I'm gonna start traveling, and then kind of got corrupted, and one thing led to another. It's like, oh, I kind of enjoy this. I can do this, and then also a much better place as opposed to England. Just as reference, I was paying rent in London about £650 for a room in a shared apartment, in a shared house. And in Mauritius, I was paying €250 for a whole apartment. So it's a huge difference in price. And cost of living there was, it's completely different. And I was like, oh, well, the whole idea, I thought I'm going to spend a lot of money with it, but I ended up saving money with this initiative. It's like, that's interesting. That could work out.
Yeah, actually, it can work out way better than you even imagine. I think that brings it back to our first point, right? You just keep an open mind, like, you know what you want to do, but everything else, stay open. It might work out so much better than you could even imagine. And I think that's
absolutely
travel.
And now when I talk to my friends in London, they ask me like, hey man, I want to start an online business. What's the best advice you can give me? And I was like, move somewhere where your cost of living is very low, so you can sustain yourself for a long period of time before you make money with your business. Because London is very expensive, and living somewhere where it's expensive, you're gonna burn cash a lot. If you don't produce anything equally, you're gonna run on fumes sooner or later. But something truly interesting, when I moved to Mauritius, I had to kind of I couldn't afford to keep my place in London, so I have to kind of get rid of all my stuff. And that was a different process because there's limitation of what you can bring, and like you only have one luggage, and I have to get rid of
Definitely.
almost everything else.
Did you
And
enjoy that process, or was it for you hard to do that?
It's an interesting process. It's hard to do it, and I enjoy it after it's done. Something like that.
I agree.
That's the
Yeah,
best way.
that's a good
How
way to
is it in
summarize
your
it.
place? How
Sorry?
is it in your place? How is it in
Yeah,
your
same. I was actually really looking forward as I was doing my research and my experiments to become quite a frugal location independent. Like I felt a deep desire that I couldn't really explain to not own things anymore, because I think I had seen during those trips that you really don't need it. So I was excited to do it. Like, let's give away all my stuff and my lease. Like, let's do it. Go super bare basics. But then, as you do it, like you said, it is a bit difficult. Like I always call it like you have the 3 Ps. You have possessions, places, and people that you can get pretty attached to. And I would say in that order, it's also harder to let go. So I think it's a process. As you go through these possessions, it will obviously trigger memories and attachments. Like you literally have to like go through all your stuff, clothing, I don't know, items, and donate, throw away, or maybe keep it. And I think that's okay. I think it's really fine to take a moment to relive that, value it, maybe feel grateful, and then decide, I'm going to make someone else super happy with this stuff, or I'm holding on to something here that's actually half broken and I might use it one day for that spare part, but of course you don't. I think with experience, the realization comes that it seems hard to let go of in the moment, but it's actually never, ever going to cross your mind anymore once you're on your way, right? Like, what I did is I kept some special like memories in a box at my dad's attic, and some clothes that I thought I'm going to need at one point, because I packed pretty warm clothes, like for, not warm clothes, but clothes for warm destinations, right? And then a year or so later, I opened that box with extra clothing again at my dad's place, and I realized I had forgotten completely about all these items of clothing. And I definitely did not need them anymore. Maybe they weren't even my style anymore. I was like happy to donate. Like I'm not going to wear it anymore. So I think that's a good trick that I do with the possessions here. When I feel in doubt, put it away for a while where you might forget about it, like a box under your bed. I don't know. And then after 2 months, open it again and see if you even thought about it at all. Like I think that's a good exercise, because usually you don't. And what I like to say is like someone else is going to be so happy, like you with the keyboards, if you walk in the street and you find that. So yeah, I think with the possessions, that's how I did it. Then places, that's a bit trickier, I feel like, to disconnect from. For example, that apartment that I had in Amsterdam, I always loved it. I guess it's similar to London. Like it's not easy to find affordable housing that you like. So I felt a bit like, am I making a mistake? What if I do want to come back? Can I move back to a similar place? But I think, as we talked about earlier, it's also a really good opportunity to know that you might get something else that otherwise you wouldn't have, right? Like I visited so many places by now that I feel really reassured. Like there's beauty everywhere, as long as you're willing to see it. Or like you, Mauritius, like you end up at a way better place that costs like half. So I think for me, it helps to have a bit clear, like what do I need in a place to feel secure and happy and productive? And then a lot of accommodations are gonna meet that need. And maybe you will decide, okay, London or Amsterdam then for me doesn't work anymore because I find the cost of living too high, or I've seen alternatives. Like for me personally, also, I think a lot of people in pandemic realized, wow, big city life is a bit too intense for me. You don't have so much space. You can't be outdoors always. Like I would never want to live in a city like that anymore now. But if I didn't let go of that place at the time, how would I have ever known, right? Like these days I prioritize living closer in nature. Like amazing, not something I would have believed when you've asked, like when you've told me that 10 years ago, but that's how it is, right? So yeah, I think
Absolutely.
open mindsets helps a lot in letting go. Yeah, and then the final P, the people, I think that's of course the trickiest. I think most people can imagine, like you don't want to miss out on important events of family members or friends. You want to support them, and likewise when you have moments where you need support, they aren't around. And I think this takes more time to get used to be comfortable on your own. I think truly, like, I'm curious how you see that, but if the foundations, if your relationships are good, if you have the right intentions, like the quality matters a lot more over quantity. So yeah, I'm curious how you deal with that, but that's what I found. Like most of my profound, important relationships with people back home have not really changed so much, honestly, since I've become location independent.
Absolutely. And I really love how you structure into the three Ps. I think it's a really well structured for think about things that is disconnected. Let's start for the stuff in the first place, the positions. I think you made a really great analogy in a sense of just put everything together which you believe that is important and leave it aside for 2 months, and then you'll realize that you don't need that much. And I had that experience exactly in the same realm when I moved to London the first time, and I decided to not buy Czech language because it was very expensive at the time, and I asked my parents to just ship everything to me once I moved there. So what happened is that it took me about 3 months to find a stable place, but like I told them, like, this is really important stuff. I cannot live without them. So you need to ship me as soon as I get there. So it took me more than expected to find a stable place. And then 3 months later, I realized that I actually don't need all the stuff. It's like, it's
Right?
just, at the time I thought it's so important. And then when I got them, it's like, I kind of I forgot about most of them. It's like,
True.
oh, that's interesting.
True. But I think it also it shows us that like the attachment to our stuff is maybe not even from a capitalistic point of view of like I need this, but it means more like, hey, you're moving to a new place, which is of course scary. There's going to be new things, and it maybe gives you also a bit of security knowing that the things that you know are familiar and going to be around you, and then you'll see in the process like you really don't need that. You're going to be fine on your own. But I think it's superhuman that we go through that, and it's okay to acknowledge it, and like I said, relive those moments. And then how cool that, like you said, you see like, no way I need all these things, it's cool. Let's just give it all away.
Absolutely. And I grew up in a culture in all time in Romania. There was a culture of collecting stuff. So because people didn't have access to stuff, and there was very much a thing that's people will store stuff away from years and generation to generation, and people will find it really difficult to let go of things. And I grew up in that culture. Like I had to rewire my brain to think in terms of the utility of the things as opposed to just like having stuff to feel secure of it. And I think it goes to a discussion you had about apartment as well. Like I think it's the most important thing is to recognize the utility of the things you own as opposed to just an attachment towards the thing in itself. So for me now, everything that is most important to me is laptop, phone, wallet, and passports, and
Yeah, true.
everything else is, yeah. If I have those things, when I walk out, I just check for those four things. If I have them, I'm happy to replace anything else. Like I can buy a toothbrush anywhere else. I can get like whatever perfume, deodorants, some other clothes. Everything can be replaced if you have those main things that's are very much irreplaceable.
Yeah, that's such a nice mindset of abundance, actually, because I recognize what you mentioned, like growing up in a place where maybe in recent history, it wasn't always like that, that everything was there for us. And I think you and me, then we live a very nice, in a way, privileged life that we can, through travel, adopt that mindset, right? Like, hey, everything we need can be bought or arranged. It will be fixed, right? Like for me, I'm always like, what do I keep? Yeah, it needs to fit the backpack, obviously. And then it should be items that I use on a daily basis. And the rest you can just buy. Like I agree so much with you. Or like, yeah, for example, I own a surfboard here now. That's a big possession to me. But when I would move here, yeah, I would sell the surfboard. I'm currently in Panama. I live at a beach where you can surf. It makes sense. If I would move to a mountain, what do I do with a surfboard? And then if I move back to the beach again, I can get another surfboard. It's really not that complex, but we tend to feel strong feelings towards these things. And I think if you start to differentiate between the two, like you put it really nicely, then it brings so much freedom and abundance. Yeah.
It is really important to be able to recognize the utility of everything. And going back to the apartment as well, you mentioned something very beautiful in a sense that you think you love your apartment, but actually there are maybe 10 factors that make you love that apartment. Maybe you have a nice color or like a nice bed or just a nice large balcony. And if you meet those 5, 10 criteria somewhere else, you're going to love that place even more.
Exactly. I've stayed in so many beautiful locations. I wouldn't want to have miss out on these things, and it gave me so many ideas also. Like if I do get a permanent place again at one point in my life, like I have a lot of ideas on what are the criteria that make me feel good, instead of, oh, I think this house is just very cool and I've had it for a long time, right? So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. That's something truly interesting about places, because that's the one thing you cannot take with you. Like anything else, you might be able to take people with you, might be able to take stuff with you, but the place you have to commit and live one place and move to another. You can't really be in two places at the same time. So it's
Exactly.
like you truly have to let go when you move to somewhere else.
And this is also hard. The point that you mentioned, can't be at two places at the same time, because I feel at the same sense, like this is what I experienced, at least. Like I used to travel at a very high speed from place to place because I was so excited to get to know all these destinations, and a bit of FOMO as well, right? Like you can't be at two places at the same time. Like, let's go to the next, let's go to the next. I've heard so many incredible things about the next village or city or destination. So I feel like that's also something that helps me. Like you truly have to be in the now here to enjoy it, appreciate the beauty, and not be too much focused on what is this other place that could potentially also be amazing, because that's definitely the flip side of the nomadic lifestyle, I would say. Yeah, how do you feel about that? Do you ever feel like there's so many destinations, or do you feel pretty happy to just settle in and experience it all where you're at?
I think it comes all with gratitude. So something, I want to talk about people as well, because it's a very interesting topic to me, in the sense that I think the people form 90%, maybe 8% of your livelihood and your experience in a place. You can have the best place in the world in terms of nature-wise, but if you have the right people, you're not going to like it. You're going to leave soon enough. So I think that people make a very large percentage of the environment that you are into. So what I learned too during the years is, because I also moved around a lot and also start to appreciate and really take in the moments when I'm there. So if I'm somebody, I will take time to appreciate, like I'm really grateful for the fact that I have this opportunity to be here, to spend time with people, to see a sunset, to go surfing, to go skydiving, or whatever that is. So I think I build this habit every time I do something, to take a moment to be grateful for that, because that's not a given. And I might not be here next year, I might not be here next month. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. So that should give you a degree of incentive to be grateful for the moments that you have, because you never know when you have them next, what's going to happen next. How do you handle it?
Yeah, I love that perspective. I feel like that's the way how I managed my attachment to people. Like I started to focus a lot more than before. I could visit family and friends whenever I wanted, right? So you take it a bit for granted. And then when I realized, like you mentioned, like I don't know when I'm going to see them again, or like especially grandparents, are they still going to be around as we get older? So when you are there, you feel super grateful. And that's where I realized like the quality matters so much more of a quantity. And I felt super grateful to spend this time and share the moments that we have. And then with the locations, I think this came with experience. Like I was so excited in the beginning, hopping around, but of course, after the first excitement, you start to feel a little bit tired. Also of the people that you meet there, right? Like in the end, what you mentioned, connections make a place so much more valuable. And when you just hop from place to place, you start to have the same conversation, like, hey, where are you from? Where are you going next? Basically, I think a lot of nomads will recognize that. I see you smiling. That wears you out. Like it doesn't bring you anything at the end. So I think, that also helps you in accepting that it's okay to stay a bit longer in one place, feel that gratitude, realize like it's not given. And in the end, I think what I see, at least with most long-term nomads, you're gonna look for community connection. That's what you're gonna crave after the initial excitement wears down, I would say. So how do I deal with that? I think I also started to see like, hey, I meet really cool people that I do connect with, but we part ways. What does it mean for me to have like more profound relationships with people? And what does it mean for me in my nomadic lifestyle, which I do not want to give up right now? And I was thinking about friendships, but also like a relationship with a life partner. So I think I took my time to really reflect on what does a deep connection even mean to me, right? And what does that require of me? Because I can want these things. I can want these cool people to come to me and have relationships with me, but what do I need to bring to the table? And I think that helped me a lot, just to start reflecting on it and be honest about it. Like conscious effort is what you need to build a profound relationship. And I guess that's not any different than non-nomadic relationships, but the playing field is obviously a bit different because you're changing your environment and the people around you are probably also changing their environment. So it comes with a challenge that you might not experience when you live in a more fixed base.
Absolutely. And that let's go back to the basic. I think you ask a very interesting question, which is what's the definition of a deep connection? So what do you think?
Wow. And after all this time reflecting, I should just like have it right at you, right? I think it's a feeling. Like, of course, you're always trying to be, in my case, I assume most people do this, to be polite, be kind, pay it forward, be open. But then with some people, even if you just started talking, you just feel this click like, hey, I think you and me have a lot more conversations to have here together. I enjoy spending time around you. I want to learn from you. I want to see your perspective. Like there's nothing from me Here, besides being in your presence and enjoying that and sharing that, deep connection for me, where I want to see them thrive and I feel that they would want the same for me. And I think as you travel a lot, you start to feel that more easily with people. And then what I also learned is when I feel that, I can just say it to people like, hey, I think you are a very interesting person. I would love to get to know you more. What helps me there is doing that in places where you might find people with the same interests. So I like yoga, surfing, hiking. These are things that are important to me that I enjoy. So I go to places where other people will also do this. I think that makes a lot of sense. And you can also do this with like events and meetups, because that will make it more likely, I guess, to attract these people and be in the presence of these people that you might find a deep connection with.
Absolutely. So something I find truly interesting, and you mentioned that as well. I feel like the nomads have a better ability to be able to create connection, even though they move a lot around a lot. And you can argue the point that sitting in the same place for like just growing up there, you have better connection. But sometimes I feel like no, they just go back to my childhood place, and I feel like aren't connection there as strong as I do have with people that I met for about a year. And that's really interesting. And I'm thinking about, am I not, are they missing something? What's going on? I think that it is true because they don't they have the level of conversation and depthness of the conversation that I have and the questioning that I'm doing. And I was like, that's truly interesting. It's not necessarily the time you need with the person, and also the mutual ability that people have and the willingness for them to connect.
100%. I think that's a very fair observation that happens a lot. Like as you expand and try different things outside the world where you come from, so to say, of course, your mindset's going to change and your interests are going to be maybe different than the people that you were always around, and that is also fine. And I feel like talking about people that are from your old life, so to say, like the place where you grew up, I think the ones where quality over quantity or like deep connection over environment per se, they will remain in your life. Like if that connection is there, you will be able to connect. But I think a lot of people that I used to connect with well, and I wish them all the best, I'm sure they wish me all the best, but yeah, with our daily different interests, that will change. I think you need to accept that a lot of relationships that you had will change. The ones that were there could become more profound, and it doesn't matter. Like whenever you see each other, and you will get a lot of new connections with people that you might not have attracted in the first place if you would have stayed wherever you were. And yeah, that kind of sixth sense that we just talked about, I think that's something we started about. This person here could be interesting, but I think yeah, there's also responsibility here on your end, right? You can't just wait for people to come to you and open up a very deep conversation. So I'm curious, like what are your strategies for that?
Well, first thing first, well, that's a great question. Like, how do you approach a conversation? I try to meet people as much as possible outside of conversational means, which means that I don't like to go to meetup or like places where you'd expect to be making conversation. I like to go places, as you mentioned as well, like activities. I like to go surfing. Like to go skydiving. I like to go hiking. I think that hiking is a great activity for meeting new people because most of the time we're going is going in a larger group of people, and we have like maybe 20 people that comes, and then we share a bunch of cars, and then we go together to a trail. And you get to talk a bunch of people on the way. The talk conversation is not the main thing of it, so you kind of use a lot of the environment to your advantage. And I try as much as possible to push the small talk to the end of the conversation. Like I like to know the basic detail once I truly think that you're an interesting person, as opposed to start to get to know you and then it's like, oh, by the way, I'm just a boring person. I don't want to imply that I meet a lot of boring people, but I want to say that I try to kind of jump directly into interesting conversation, and you probably experienced that as well. And I think that I had similar experience with you. We kind of like the first time we kind of talk, it's like, oh, we kind of like we have a few things in common that we can kind of explore deeper, and then we seem to be both curious people and also like very interesting to learn new things, which is something truly interesting. And we have that thing in common. It's like, hey, I know X about this, what do you know, and how do you apply it, and how can we work together? How can we share our knowledge to be able to do better in this round? So I think that's a basic start of the conversation. Just kind of skip the small talk, go direct into interesting topic, and then try to build a connection from there and see if you have relevant interest.
Yeah, I love that strategy. Yeah, like trying to force myself to wait to ask until the end, like you say, like where are they actually from, or what is their job, or how old are you, like these kind of basic things that don't really matter, but try to see like what is sparking this person here, like, or something that we have joint spark perhaps, and see if we can dive a bit deeper. Like, oh, I see you have surfboard, that's amazing, I love surfing. Oh, what about you, where did you learn, what do you think about this wave? Like this can start to something a bit bigger, but yeah, where are you from? That's maybe not the best question to start with, is what I learned over time. Like that's for sure a killer.
I think that for nomads, it doesn't matter anymore. So I've learned that if you ask a nomad where you're from, that won't matter. They have the most of the time they have the personality of a nomad. So it's kind of it's multicultural personality. So it doesn't really realm. It's like a mix of things that they learn through the way. And that's something truly interesting, because you kind of like that's something interesting about a conversation. When you ask somebody where you're from, you don't ask where you're from. You ask like, which kind of culture should I associate you with, or something along those lines. And I think that for Nomad, it doesn't work, that question. So it's really interesting to start talking to people, and then like, oh, by the way, where are you from? Like at the end of it, it's like, can you guess?
Guessing is also, and I think, of course, we do these things because it's like a survival tactic, right? We like to group people, as you mentioned. You want to see what kind of culture are they from? Are they similar to me? Or are they very different? And in the end, we do that anyways, because what I also like to do to make more profound connections that work for me as a nomad is staying in co-living spaces, working from co-working spaces, so I can meet other digital nomads, because I know by default we have things in common. You're also working and traveling. I find it really interesting to learn about their businesses, what kind of jobs do they do, what kind of perspectives they have. But again, of course, I'm right into my own bubble. I'm going into the digital nomad bubble, and it's not a bad thing per se.
Something I find really interesting, and then regarding communication and building connection, is that there is no quick tip to do so. It's always about practice. So the best thing you want to do, and if you want to build connection, just have this in mind, practice over and over again. And then with every person, try to think about like, how do I connect to this person, and have this in mind. And then over time, you kind of get better at it. So there's no like shortcut to it. It's just about the practice that you have to do it. And I think that this is what we have an advantage as digital nomads, is that we get exposed to so many people, and then both anything else is just the practice of talking to people all the time, and also engaging with new people all the time. That makes us a bit better of socializing and make connections.
Yeah, I like that perspective, because also you're going to have conversations and meetings with people that are maybe not a big hit right away, and that's okay. And then you just move on, or you'll find out if you try again, like you say, like if you practice, then maybe you and that person end up too having like a lot of things in common, or they can show you new perspectives or things that you never even knew about. And yeah, you discover something new. So I feel like it is practice. And the more you expose yourself to people that are different from you in a setting that is unfamiliar to you, in the end, you will benefit tremendously from that.
Absolutely. And now going back to the part that is pretty sad and also very interesting, is like, how do you let go once you build a connection? It's like you've been to a place for, let's say, a couple of weeks, maybe a few months, and you made a few good friends, and you really, really connect with people, and then you know that it's time to go. And one of the things about the digital nomad is that you can try to hope that you're going to go back to this place, but you never know what's going to happen. You can always go to the next place and then change your course and never go back to that place. So how do you let go? How do you approach the process of disconnecting from people and then letting go to an old place to move to a new one?
That's for sure, yeah, the hardest one of the three Ps. Like the possessions and the places, okay, but the people, for sure, especially when you meet someone and maybe it's just one night, you have such a fun talk, and tomorrow they're on a plane, or you are like, yeah, what do you do? And you can always say, oh yeah, maybe we can meet up at this point, that point again, but they're not going to be in your life every day. That's the consequence of this lifestyle. And I think this takes time and getting used to it. You can also express that sucks. You don't have to be right away okay with that. Yeah, how do I deal with it? Knowing from experience, doing it over and over again, like this is part of it. This is the lifestyle you choose. In the end, I know that this way of living makes me super happy, which means I have to say goodbye a lot to family and friends, but also to new connections. And I think it's also something beautiful. Like life is ever changing. I am really the gratefulness that you mentioned before. Like that's when I feel gratefulness that I can experience that I can get to meet these people, trusting that if it's going to be like that, one day we see each other, and if not, then thank you for the energy that we could share. And if you feel like you really do need to see them, like that's what I did, but the person who's my life partner now, we had a good connection. I had other plans. We met here in Panama. I was going to go to Brazil and Argentina. We stayed in touch. At one point, we said, hey, would it be nice to see each other again? And we made that jump. So you can always still decide to come back and do meet each other if you feel like this is worth exploring. And that's what we did. Like, but this comes with time and with trust. Like, it is hard, and it's okay that it's hard. That's also, I think, what I learned here. But it does get easier. You do get more used to saying goodbye. Like in the beginning, when I said goodbye to my mom, my dad, my sisters, I was crying every time. Now I'm like, that's okay. It's gonna be before you know it that we see each other again. Like, and they also know that, and they're happy for me that I'm living this life. I'm happy that they're living their life. Modern communication helps a lot, I guess. Like if you did this like 50 years ago, what would you do? Write a postcard? Like it's so easy to get connected through the technology. It's not the same, especially in a long distance relationship, which I've also experienced with my partner. But it makes it more worthwhile when you do choose to be together, and the moments that you do get to get together. And yeah, it sounds all very zen, but I think it's a big process of letting go, accepting, getting used to it, and sometimes feeling super frustrated about that.
Absolutely. Something truly interesting about what to say is that we as digital nomad have a degree of flexibility in terms of location. What that means is that if you have a really, really, really good connection with somebody and things could work out, there's always a chance that you can come back because you can tend to bend based on that relationship that you acquire. So while sometimes when I travel, I meet people say like, hey, you're a digital nomad, just going to leave anytime soon, so we're not going to see each other again. And I'm trying to kind of promote this idea that there's also a great deal of flexibility that we have. And if I, for example, when I came to Portugal, the first time I came here, I said to myself, I'm just going to stay here for 3 months and I'm going to go back to England and go somewhere else. And then because I met so many interesting people and I met so many friends, I decided to come back. So something truly interesting is that there is a degree of flexibility to us. It's like if we fell in love with a place or if we fell in love with some people, it's definitely a high chance to come back, because that's the beauty of having a location independent lifestyle, is that you can choose to be somewhere else. You don't always have to move from one place to another. It's your choice, and you can make the choice to see where are the people that there.
Exactly, and that mindset is so beautiful. Like you choose to either live your nomadic life because this makes you truly happy, or you choose to come back to a place and spend time with people that are important to you, and it makes it so much easier. Like I choose every year to spend a couple of months in the Netherlands with family and friends, with clients that I work with, because that's important to me. And then I could also choose to be here in Panama with my partner, who isn't fully location independent. And it makes me so happy because, yeah, what if I was like just coming on holidays here, had a fixed job in Amsterdam, then for sure our relationship would have been totally different. And it's great that I can be this flexible. And same as India, I never imagined that I would spend so much time here in Panama, but I'm starting to see the beauty of it. I'm starting to integrate more. I'm getting to know the community here, and it's bringing me a lot of things that I wasn't maybe looking for. But yeah, circumstances changed, and having that flexibility and that openness can bring you so many beautiful things. And I think that's really my favorite thing about this whole lifestyle, about being a digital nomad, location independent, nomadic. Like, yeah, wonderful.
Yeah, it's always about the choice. It's all about the fact that you can choose to stay or to go to the next place. And something I also want to ask you, you mentioned that you had a period of time where you're traveling from one place to another. Is there, and also connecting to the fact that you have to connect to people and also disconnect, is there a degree of maybe avoiding connection or something that could happen? I've noticed to a few other nomads that I talk to is that the reason for which you might want to jump from one place to another is because you have maybe a fear of having disconnection with people. What do you think?
I think this can definitely be true for certain individuals. I think it has been maybe a little bit true for me at one point. Like when I mentioned earlier in the conversation that I started to feel at one point like I crave deeper connections, like what does that mean to me and what is then required of me? That gave me a good mirror, right? Like if I keep jumping from place to place, then it's going to be harder. So am I maybe avoiding opening up, being vulnerable? That's the questions that came to my mind. And that was a nice period of reflection. Like it's very honest. It's not always fun what you find, but I started writing down a bit like, yeah, what am I afraid of? What could I improve? And I feel like as soon as I started doing that, that feeling also slowly diminished. And I started to meet more people with whom I got more profound relationships. So I think 100% true. Like I can fully say now that I'm not running away from anything like that. But at phases in my life, I think so. And it's important when you notice that you observe that, reflect, integrate, because it's sounds super stereotypical, but of course you can't run away. At one point, it's going to catch up with you. But I do think some people for sure that I met on the road suffer from that. Yeah.
It's really interesting that you had this level of self-awareness to be able to write down and say like, oh, maybe there's something here that I need to kind of investigate more and to look into more, because I can sense that I have a proclivity towards running away from people, running away from connection, and that takes a high level of self-awareness. So well done with that.
Thank you. Like I said, it was not always fun, the things that you find in that moment, but I do believe like it's not so cool in the moment, but afterwards you're going to feel super gratitude for growing like that. This is the only way you can grow. You have to step out of the comfort zone. You have to book that ticket to India, feel nervous, do it, and realize like, hey, I can live a whole digital nomad life. You have to confront yourself about your true feelings and then realize, okay, I can actually be in a relationship with someone as a digital nomad. Like all these things are possible, but you can only do it by going through a bit of the uncomfortable aspect of that. And I try to tell myself that as well when I start something new that doesn't seem so comfortable or fun. Relates back to our earlier topic. Like once you do it a few times, you realize like it's part of it. I can do that, and the result is going to be amazing.
That's really something interesting in a sense that I think our brain can tricks us sometimes to feel something uncomfortable to something that we're afraid looks like something that we're not liking it specifically, and it's not my thing, as opposed to just like, hey, I'm afraid of X. So it kind of gets diluted into your mind. You don't think about, oh, I'm afraid of X, Y, and Z. I'm just comfortable in that situation. So you think that is not your thing. And I can give you a great example. One of the things is that I'm a skydiver, so I like to jump from plane. Obviously, it's a very scary sport for most people. But most people I met say that, oh, this is not my thing. And I disagree with that. I think that I can only agree with you that it's not your thing once you got your skydiving license, you do 30 jumps, and it's like, okay, I've done it. I know what it's about. And then I decided, I think I just don't enjoy it. I understand that. It's like similar to getting a driving license. I have my driving license. I drove like, I don't know, 1,000 miles, and I don't enjoy driving. It's not my thing. But it's like somebody saying that had never driven in their life, driving is not my thing. It's like, maybe you're afraid of it. Maybe it's not, you don't know that it's not your thing.
True. I love that attitude. I'm also very much on the team of you have to try anything once. Of course, I will respect people that don't want to try things, but then I do feel like, but then how do you truly know? And yeah, I think that's also a driving force behind the lifestyle that we live. Like we're probably very curious people. We feel like we want to try something, and then if it's a no, it's a no, and then we try something else. And yeah, that's fun. It's not maybe how everyone would do it, but for me, it has worked out super well.
Absolutely. It's all about conquering yourself and realizing truly what's your thing, is not your thing, and not being blinded by any fears or discomfort that might come across. Cool. I have two questions that I want to ask, and this is the question that I'd like to ask to everybody else. So I'm really curious about your answer to this. So the first question is, what would you tell yourself before starting the traveling journey that you embarked when you left to India? What would your current self tell to your former self then?
I think it relates quite a bit to what we just said. Like, stop making like excuses or doubting it. Just go and try. You are responsible for your own journey. And then it's just better to get started and adjust as you go, or say, hey, I tried it and I didn't like it. I think that's a big one. I feel like I always got to that point when I was younger, but like I think it would have been nice if my older self told myself it's gonna be okay. Another thing I would really like to tell myself is that it's okay to ask for help. Like you don't have to figure it out all by yourself. Talk to people, share what you have in mind, share what you're afraid of, ask them how they have overcome whatever they were dealing with, what they felt nervous about. That's what I really enjoy in this conversation as well, that we reflect, we ask each other things. These days I see that that's so valuable to share with other people. It's just, you can do so much more with other people. I love to be alone. I love to do things by myself and figure it out. That's also something that helps if you're a digital nomad, probably. But in the end, it's so much more fun when you share and ask people to help you. That's really something I learned.
Absolutely. It's okay to not have everything figured out.
100%.
It took me a long time to realize that. It's like the more I grew up, the more I realized that nobody has anything figured out, and that's okay.
Not at all. And this is the good part about growing up, right? You used to think, oh, the adults know everything, and now you're like, nah, nobody knows. We all just try our best, and that's enough. That's all you can do.
Absolutely. And the last question I want to ask you is like, what would you advise a person just about to start now?
I would tell them to experiment. So start small, maybe go somewhere that isn't too crazy out of your comfort zone, but do try. Like I did that time in Asia when I asked my employer, like ask maybe for a month, maybe to a country that you've already been before, that you know a little bit, maybe not too crazy far in another time zone or completely different culture like I had in India, but no worries, it can totally work out. Try some different things. Don't give up right away when it's not exactly what you expected. Just adjust, continue, talk to people, ask them for help. Don't spend all your days working alone from your apartment, and then go from there. It takes some time, but experimenting, I would say, is so important. You just made that point, like, know yourself. That's how you're going to have the best life. And that's not going to happen in one day that you know everything, that you have everything figured out. Just try to surround yourself by other people or go to places that you find inspiring, and then it will all start flowing. But take that step, start small, experiment, because otherwise it will never be perfect and you will never do it.
Absolutely. That is a great advice. Right. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I found the conversation really, really interesting, and I really like that you kind of challenged a few points that I had regarding things. So that I really like that part, and I learned a few things as well, which is truly great. And that's how I find a very successful conversation. A conversation when I get to learn things and I get to have my points challenged, which is great.